हाँ ठीक है. Okay. So good afternoon, learners. On this second session for the course on Introduction to Cognitive Psychology. This is an opportunity for you to put questions, feedback and suggestions related to this course. For the next hour, my job is to listen to your questions, feedbacks and suggestions. And based on the limited knowledge that I have about this subject, to answer and provide resolutions of your queries that you may have about this course. Feedbacks and suggestions are also welcome. And these feedbacks and suggestions are actually very good because they provide me with an opportunity to improve the course further. There are three ways in which questions can be put to me through in this live session. You can put a question to me through the online Excel sheet which has been circulated. Questions can also be asked by logging into this Meet online session, either in a face-to-face manner, or you can put in your questions in the chat box and I can read these questions and provide resolutions to your queries. Parallelly, there is a YouTube live session which is running where all learners of this course can log in and ask questions. So there are three possible ways in which questions can be asked, and the live session can be utilized. So all those people who are logged in at this moment and further on, I would request them to ask their questions, provide their suggestions and feedbacks related to this course. Now, till the point of time that somebody asks a question, let me give a brief overview of what the course is all about. The course on Introduction to Cognitive Psychology is a first level course where concepts related to cognition are explained. This is a 30-hour lecture course where online videos have been provided for a number of topics in the cognitive psychology area. These topics span from introducing the field to introducing the research methodology which is followed in the course or in the field of cognitive psychology. Further on a week by base manner, topics of cognitive psychology related to perception, attention, memory, thinking and problem solving, decision making, language are covered in a phased wise manner. In addition to the video lectures, an updated transcript of the course is also provided. And if students who are learning this course read the transcript well, also follow the online lectures and complete the assignment sessions given to them, they would learn a lot about what cognitive psychology or human cognition is all about. A little rider that I would add to this session is that the present course on cognitive psychology takes a Western prominence, which means that the theories which have been proposed by the Western psychologists on human cognition is dealt with in this course. There are some queries related to the fact that why was the Indian viewpoint to cognitive psychology not discussed in this course. I should make it clear that since the course was designed in such a way that it explained only the Western line of thought on human cognition, Indian cognitive psychology viewpoints were not addressed. Also, I would also try to explain here that within the Indian perspective, human cognition or psychology per se is not extensively described. Out of the Sat Darshan, which the Indian philosophy talks about, the Sankhya and the Yoga philosophy are primarily held as the master source for psychology and cognitive psychology. Now, since my own access to these philosophical viewpoints is very limited, and I have very recently started understanding and learning about this, in future I can promise that an Indian viewpoint into how human cognition works will also be included. So Hossein, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the online meet today. If you have a question or suggestion, you can put in that. So as I was saying, that the Western influence or thought process of cognition is what is included in this course. In future, I'm thinking of also designing a small course which talks about the Indian thought process, about how cognition really works. Psychology per se is not discussed in the Indian psychology perspective or the Shat Darshan, but there are bits and pieces about how the manas, the buddhi, and the ahankara are dealt with and how they collaborate together to form this dualistic viewpoint about the Prakriti and the Purush. These concepts I will discuss in a separate course. For today, if you are online or if you're listening to me, we have this 1 hour where you can ask your questions and I can start providing answers to whatever queries you may have. So let's start taking questions, and if you are logged in, please start asking your questions. So Hussain has a question. He says that he is learning from these philosophies, especially from Greek and Roman influence on contemporary Indian societal processes and how it affected the human behavior. So that's a good thing, Hussain. And the same thing is for me because I'm not trained in philosophy per se. my training is in experimental psychology and the idea about how information processing, the Western thought about information processing is explained. That is what my expertise is. But then off recently, I've started learning about Indian philosophy. Particularly, I'm focusing on the yoga and the Sankhya philosophy, and trying to understand how this idea of duality and the singularity is explained, and how the idea about representations of knowledge is described in this. So once I'm done with that, once I have read that, I'll do a comparison or maybe present a small course which will explain in some detail as to how the Indian philosophy or the Indian version of psychology comes about. A lot of psychology is also to be found in the Bhagavad Gita, but that too has to be read and understood. And there's no one book which I found or one source of knowledge which I found which talks about the Indian version of psychology. So for now, we'll stick to the Western thoughts about psychology. So what do we do in this course then? In this course, as I explained, we started by explaining how cognition came about, the study of cognition came about, and how knowledge is explained in terms of cognition. We looked at different formats of how cognition and knowledge is represented, so representations of knowledge. That's good, Hussein, and maybe Professor Ranganath will, his course will offer you more insights into the Indian viewpoint. So further on, when I thoroughly explained where does psychology come from, or cognitive psychology come from, what are the roots of it, right from the Greeks to the Romans to the whole lot of idea about how cognitive psychology came about, I explain the various research methodology which is used in cognitive psychology. Further on, I take each cognitive process separately. Example, taking in perception and explaining what perception is and what are the various theories which are dealt with in perception. Then talking about attention as to how attention is linked to perception and what are the theories of attention. Further on, explaining memory and then language, categorization and organization of knowledge, and then more about decision making, thinking, and problem solving. And this is what the course comprises of. So each chapter is dealt with separately, and most of the prevalent theories in these sections of cognition are discussed in this course. So if you were to get good marks in this course, the best way to do that would be to watch the lectures. The first thing to do. And how you do it, you look at these lectures not in one go, but by breaking the lectures into small parts. While you're looking at the lectures, also read the transcript. The transcript is thoroughly corrected, and a lot more information is provided in the transcript, which is now accompanied with the lecture on cognitive psychology. Not only the transcript and the lecture, each week an assignment is provided. And if you read the assignment properly and do the assignment properly, you will have thorough knowledge about the subject. If you can further dedicate a few hours, there are a couple of introductory books on cognitive psychology which are been listed. And if you are really interested in understanding human cognition from the Western perspective, you could start reading these books. These books are not very difficult, but if you start reading them, in addition to listening at the lectures and reading the manuscripts, you will find that a lot of information is available in a very simple way. This information about human cognition can be used in a number of ways. The information provided can be used to further knowledge, can also be used to apply this knowledge into developing new projects or creating new ideas. This knowledge can also be applied in the industry and in a whole lot of other fields. If you are of a research bent, taking this knowledge can also help you in deciding whether you want to do further research and probe into newer theories and newer research into the area of cognitive psychology. So this was what the main idea behind designing this course was. Now, since we are here only for 1 hour, I'd request you to start asking questions, and I'll start also answering them. If you have certain suggestions and feedbacks, you can also start putting those feedbacks and suggestions. So San has a question and says that what influences a person to adopt a biased perception even when they know the right course of action, causing them to align with power groups, and then he or she changes the statement he quoted. Now, obviously, if you are talking about why people adopt a biased perception, even after knowing that there is a right way to do things, is basically because they are looking for some kind of a reward or they are looking for some kind of a benefit. And benefit is what promotes people. But then there is a small section of society or small section of people who are biased to a certain view, not because they get directly benefited, but because they're working under pressure or they're working under some kind of an influence. So mostly it is benefit which makes people do things. These benefits could be a direct benefit or an indirect benefit, or it could be, in some cases, a firm belief or a wrong belief which may make people biased to a certain viewpoint or a certain way to say things. I hope that answers your question, Hussain. And so Shubham has a question. Which book should I read to enhance the knowledge in cognitive psychology? So Shubham, the easiest book that you start with is called Cognitive Psychology in and Out of the Laboratory. The book is written by Kathleen Gallotti, and it's a very basic book in the sense that it is a very primary book which explains some of the classic theories in cognition. If you want to read further from here, there are two ways. One, you can take a further advanced book which introduces you to human cognition, and that would be a book on handbook on cognitive psychology. Or you could take in a book by Anderson That's also called Understanding Human Cognition, which is more updated than the Kathleen Guwahati book, and it further explains and incorporates new theories in human cognition. Another way to do it is whatever section in cognition that you're interested in, you can focus on that section. And there are a number of books which are available which will explain to you in more detail the section. There are a number of research papers which are published, probably research papers which are of the review nature, so review papers, and that will explain you further any topic in cognitive psychology. But the most primary book that one should start with is reading Guwahati's book on cognitive psychology, which is called Human Cognition in and Out of the Laboratory. So I hope that answers Shubham's question. If there are other people also logged on, I would ask them to start asking questions and putting in their viewpoints. I'm looking at the Excel sheet where two questions have been put to me. One question is, it's not a question, but Professor Amit Bodh Upadhyay, he just says that he wanted to join, so hopefully Professor Upadhyay has joined. And then I have Tanmay Mangal, who's a student, and he asked what type of questions will be asked in the exam. So Tanmay, the questions that will be asked in the exam are questions related to the course. These will be multiple type questions. There is only one answer to each question, so be sure not to tick more than one answer. Also, there are 50 in number, so 2 marks for each question that you attempt. The questions are based on the assignments, and if you read the transcript, the assignments, and the video lecture, I'm pretty sure you would be able to easily answer all the questions which have been asked in your final exam. Let's take Hussein's question. So, sir, like earlier, we believe that the sun that revolves around the earth. Galileo says that no, it's the earth and other planets that revolve around the sun. But then he was opposed and he changed his statement. Okay, so if you look at Galileo, he actually never changed his viewpoint. The heliocentric view, which was proposed by Galileo, he stuck to that view. Although at the later point of time, due to the pressure of the church, which was very powerful at that point of time, and due to fear of his own life, he had to accept the view that it is the earth around which everything revolves. So as I said beforehand, not only benefit, but sometimes pressure or fear of something makes you change your viewpoint. And this is what exactly happens with Galileo. He feared his own life. And what good is a theory when the person who proposes theory is no more there to explain the theory? So looking at these benefits or looking at these points, he decided to temporarily accept or publicly accept the view that it is the earth around which everything moves. This was what the Christian church wanted everyone to believe, and that is what he accepted. Hussein has another question, and it is that I also want to ask that after the course, can I start practicing counseling kids and adults? Now, Hussein, there is one problem, and that is this course is on cognition. If you want to counsel, or if you want to go into counseling, I would like you to have a degree in counseling. There are a number of institutions which provide you some sort of degree and some knowledge about counseling. Counseling psychology is a field in itself, and it has certain principles which should be understood to counsel. Also remember that when counseling, you are actually dealing with a person. And so when dealing with an in-person or uh, a patient or a client, as Roger would say, you would have to have some kind of license to practice it. So for counseling kids and adults in a practice way, I believe that when you're saying practice, you're going to go out with it and start uh, some kind of a business around this counseling. You'll have to have a license. So my suggestion would be that after doing the course, and this course not being directly related to counseling per se, you should look for institutions which gives you these degrees and provides you with the techniques of counseling. Counseling is more of a technique, right? If you want to understand more, there are some books on counseling psychology, and I invite you to look at those books and see what do they say. Counseling psychology is actually one of the uh, honors that people take in their masters. So my suggestion would be look at these courses and look at these universities and courses which offer you some degree in counseling. So hope that explained your query. So, Mom, so as a layman, can you tell me what are the benefits of cognitive psychology in business? Okay, sure. So, cognition is about the mind. It is about how people think, and how people think decides how people behave. Let's say that you have a business. Any business that people have, or any business that people start, is for benefits. Correct? So you are there for benefit. If you can understand how people make decisions while purchasing products or while deciding between two products A and B, you can then use that knowledge, and with that knowledge you can implement those things in your product. Let's take a simple example. Suppose two companies A and B makes biscuits. Now company A makes biscuits which are fine in packaging, but the product is not something that people of that sector or people of that particular market is looking for. On the other hand, company B does a research and finds out what kind of biscuits would people from that market, when I'm saying market, I'm looking at a geographical region, they like. So they spend more money in terms of improving the biscuit than improving the product design or packaging. which company would benefit? Obviously, the company which invested more in understanding how people in a particular geographical area would prefer a biscuit. This is just a small example. Consumer psychology, the study of how consumers think, decide, and buy products, has a lot related to human cognition. And there is a course that I have on consumer psychology. Perhaps if you watch a couple of videos from that course or get registered to this course, you will have a much better of idea of how cognition can help businesses. So I hope that answers your question. And so Hussain has a question. Already completed an MA e-commerce, digital marketing, MSc, IT, core development and management and material management. Currently, I'm pursuing MA in public administration, among others. So you have a lot of degree, Hussain. And what I would say is, why don't you use the knowledge in psychology to sit and see how to combine all these degrees that you have into getting into a better future? I understand that learning is a good thing and that you can do that. But if you can just sit and try to concentrate and find out what is it that you think is best for you, what is it that interests you, and then choose to do any further degree in that area, I think all these information that you have would benefit you there. So my suggestion would be to sit for a couple of days and talk to yourself. Because one thing that the present generation is lacking is talking to themselves. So talk to yourself and find out that what interests you. And if that is clear, then not necessarily we should have a degree, or you should go for any further degree. With whatever degrees you have, you can then decide one field and use all those knowledges that you have from different field into that field and can come up as a great success. Right? So sit and think what interests you, right? Because you have degrees in a lot of fields. How do you combine all together to give you an advantage in the field of your likingness? So that is what my suggestion would be. Purnima has a question. Sir, can you explain how far cognitive psychology can be used for criminology or forensic psychology? And which degree is relevant? So Purnima, a part of forensic psychology and criminology, and also in law, particularly in criminal law, theories of cognitive psychology can be used. As I said, the basis of cognitive psychology or human cognition is how people think. What type of thinking do people have? A good example is something related to how people reason. When making reasoning or when making judgments, people use a number of shortcuts. A good example is the anchoring shortcut or the representative shortcut. What do they mean? It means that the representative shortcut says that if I see a tall person coming out of or walking near a basketball field, and if he's wearing shorts and carrying a ball, most probably what we do is we try to interpret this person as a basketball player. He could very well be a lawyer or a policeman, or somebody else. What we have done is we have not gathered enough information, and based on certain representative features, for example, the idea that most tall people play basketball and he is coming out of the basketball field and is also carrying a basketball, makes us determine that he is a basketball player. This example gives us some knowledge about how people think or how people use mental shortcuts in operating or making decisions. This kind of information can be used very well in the field of forensic and criminal psychology. With the knowledge of cognitive psychology, we can very well predict to a higher degree of how criminals would behave or how they would act. Because they also work, most criminals also tend to work with a particular mindset, right? Or particular schemas. And this will help us not only predicting, but understanding the criminal minds. The degree that you want to know about, which will work in both this field, there is a university in Gujarat, a forensic university, which offers degree related to both forensic psychology and criminal psychology. That is what I'm aware of. Maybe you do an internet search and you will come to know about degrees, particularly masters in forensic psychology. I guess that's what the degree is, but I'm not very sure, so please find out. And that is how, or that is what the degrees are concerned to this area. So, so I don't want to pursue any further course. So what would you suggest me? As I started my self-employed journey to empower and train people with focus on empowerment of downtrodden and the needy one. That's a very human thing to do and a very good thing to do, sir. And I appreciate your efforts. My suggestion is, in addition to whatever you're doing, why don't you, as I explained before, sit down, look at all the knowledge that you have gathered, and find out that one area which can, or which attracts you. And if you come to that area, or if you come to know that particular field or that particular knowledge that attracts you, you can use all these information that you have from IT, from e-commerce, from digital marketing. Take all these together and build that area. It could very well be empowering people or helping people or giving them career advice. But then the way I thought you were trying to explain counseling was psychological counseling. For that, you would require a degree in psychology. But yes, if you want to counsel people in terms of career advisors and career choices, or help people who really need your help, you're doing a very good job. And if you need help at any point of time, from my side, I'm always there to help you. But for once, I would also advise you to think really hard as to what attracts you and use all this knowledge, because you have knowledge from multiple fields. It's very rare that you have so much information available with one person. Okay, so you can use that, combine that knowledge and take it to your calling, or take it to your field that interests you. I think that should answer your question, Hussain. Now, if there are other people who are also registered here, please ask your question. So Subham has a question. They mentioned schema. Can you please elaborate a little more? Schema. So Shubham, what schema really means is everyone has a particular way of doing things, or schemas are more, I'd say, publicly acceptable forms of doing things. Let's take this small example. So if I show you a field, picture of a field or a farmhouse, what do you expect in a farmhouse? There'll be grass, there'll be animals, there'll be plants and trees, there'll be fields with grains, fruit trees, houses, mud houses, thatched mud houses, there would be tractors and this kind of a thing. So when I ask you to imagine what would a village look like or a picture of a field look like, this is what you would imagine, because this is what the expectation from a village would be, or a field picture of a field would be. Now imagine that in the center of all this you see an octopus. This challenges the mental representation or the schema of the field or village that you have. In a village you don't see an octopus, right? And so this is out of schema. So schemas are these representations or these ways in which knowledge are probably packed in or represented within the brain. I hope that answers your question, Suman. Roshan. So how does human cognition make a person extrovert, introvert, intuitive, sensing, perceiving, thinking, judging, among others? So for introvert, extrovert, or sensing, perceiving, thinking, judging is the way you see things, is the way you deal with information. There are multiple ways in which the same information can be dealt. For example, let's say that you're wearing a best t-shirt and you go out there and somebody commented, you're looking good. This comment, you're looking good, the way it is played in your head or the way you perceive and then further elaborate this comment decides your action. If you're an extrovert, you would smile, or if you perceive this information extrovertly, you will smile back. If introvertly, maybe you start thinking that this is not a comment, this is kind of a sarcasm. And similarly, the other, judging and thinking and things like that. What we teach in cognition is how to look at an information in the right context. Probably by looking at how the speech was located, how the speech was produced, would give you more information on what was said. If somebody says they are looking good, which means that there is stress on the word good, probably this is sarcasm. So you have to really hear and see how the words were said. What human cognition would do is to look at the kind of speech that was said, take this speech, try to understand from the speech what is being said, and based on that, make the attribution or the reasoning of why it was said. And if you do that, you would do the correct judging, thinking, or whatever you're going to. And that is how I think this cognition or the brain helps you in making the right and correct decisions in most of the time. Purnima. So what book or material would be useful in cognition along with criminal law and criminology? So books, as I said, I have named a couple of book about criminology and criminal law and criminology. I'm not very sure, Purnima. So, but with human cognition, you can start with Guwahati's book and then move further on. And probably, if you look at the syllabuses of these universities which offer you a degree in criminology or forensic psychology, you would uh, probably get the name of these books. Also, is cognitive psychology used in victimology? I'm not very sure because I'm not sure about victimology. But then, if it is, from what it understands, it's the knowledge of describing victims or the act of being a victim. And so, if anything has to do with knowledge or how knowledge is represented and how knowledge is processed, it has to do with human cognition. And so, probably, I think there is a link. Percent. Which part of the brain affects these behaviors, and can one rewrite and be adaptive of all these nature of an individual? So there are different brains. Sorry, there are different parts of the brain which influences this, but mostly the frontal cortex is responsible for most of the cognitive activities that we do. Having said that, there are a number of brain areas which are responsible for doing this cognition related activities. Rewriting and adapting, I'm not very sure if that can be done, but then uh, some form of rewriting is achieved. For example, replacing fear memories can be achieved by using a technique called TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation. Here, what happens is that learning, that fear learning that we have, can be rewritten or can be sort of rewired so that the intensity of this fear learning goes away. So that's one thing. Also, sir, if we add gadgets like neural link in human brain, will it affect the human behavior and how? I'm not very sure about neural link and how read some work on human machine interfacing, but not sure about neural link. But what one thing I can suggest to you is neural link would not work. The simple reason is that the speed of processing information by the human brain is very, very, very slow. If your Neuralink or Neuralink works at, let's say, 1,000 bytes or 10,000 bytes per second, the human brain processes information at the rate of 1 byte per second, or at the maximum 10 byte per second. The brains were not designed for speed processing, but human brain from nature was designed to do that thing which preserves it. So what it will try to do is, at everything that it does, it doesn't go for speed, but it goes for that adaptive value. Also, human brains never do accurate processing to the T kind of a processing. What it does is, it does processing in such a way that things can be worked out. So it works in a way that is adaptive in nature, that can make life go on. Brain parts of brain and brain processing were never related. One second. Afterwards. थोड़ी देर में, huh? Okay. So, as I said, brain processing was not related to how fast things can be done. It was more or less related to the fact that how a human being or the person who processes this brain can live his life without much problems. And probably that is the reason why neural link would not be a good idea. Subham has a question, and the question says that, so what is the difference between cognitive psychology versus general psychology? Good question. General psychology has a lot more than cognitive psychology, and a cognitive psychology is a subset of general psychology. Whereas general psychology will cover things like social psychology, which is how humans interact with uh, environment and people in the environment, and other things like motivation and industrial psychology and work and organization and clinical psychology and behavior therapies and abnormal psychology. Cognitive psychology is just one part of it, which deals with how humans process information. So it's a subset. So then, how and why Einstein's brain that of Stephen Hawking contributed to understanding of how genius brain works, especially when we talk about Nobel laureates like Amartya Sen of India. It would be good to look at Einstein's brain and Hawking's brain and how geniuses really work. What happens is geniuses, they focus their uh, working into a particular zone. If you look at Einstein's brain, there is a certain section of his brain, which is the frontal area, which is more developed than any other area. But then this can happen with anyone else too. So why is he not Einstein? The simple reason is that Einstein dwelled in this question, and he deeply studied those questions, and in doing so he used more of the frontal cortex. If he used more of the frontal cortex, this area became more uh, uh, developed and faster processing. Right? It got priority than any other thing. You would have heard stories about Einstein where he forgot taking meals or forgot how to get into the train and that kind of a thing. So it's not that using more frontal cortex did not harm him. If he used one area more, other areas would suffer. And that is what I'm talking about, the balance. The normal human brain balances everything so that you don't get deficit in one area. With Einstein and Stephen Hawking and other geniuses, they are very good in one sector or one field, but other areas gets suffered because of that. Even for Nobel laureates, that's the same thing, right? So brain maintains this equilibrium, but then a genius, for that matter, or somebody who has a expert, he uses one brain part or uses one side of the brain more, right? And because of that, other things suffer. Subham Mishra. So I'm preparing for CUET-PG. Can it help me in any way? Yes, it can help you in a lot of way. All you have to do is find out. And this CUET-PG, I'm not very sure what does it mean. It is entrance test for post-graduation, but which subject? So if whatever subject you are doing or doing the post-graduation on, you have to look at that field, and that is going to help. If I'm correct, if I don't know if I'm correct or not in understanding what is this CUPTEG, but if that is what it is, then I think it is going to actually help you. So I hope with whatever knowledge I have, I explained some of the doubts and some of the queries that you had. We are nearing the end of this session, and if you have up till now not been able to ask your questions, you can send these questions directly to me through my email, which is listed on the site, or put it on the course forum, and I'll reply to those questions. Or we would have another online meeting in the near future, and you can ask those questions there. So if No more questions are there, and since the time slot also for this session is already over, I thank you all for being here and asking your wonderful questions and giving me the opportunity to answer those questions for you. So for this session for today, I would sign off from the MOOC studio. Thank you for being here, and let's hope that we meet in future with more wonderful questions which will provide me an opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you.